Hi there, this is Bob the Weatherman. It's cold out there. Put your hat and coat on, and let me tell you, I'm sorry. Sorry, I just thought it was cold out there. This is the way I usually start, I think. Welcome. Welcome to the Philanthropic Planner Show. This isn't the Weather Channel, so don't worry, but I'm supposed to hold this up at the beginning, and I told Karen, I'll do something stupid again. So welcome to the Philanthropic Planner. Now notice that the title of this program is pretty good. A piece of the pie. No, a piece of the philanthropic pie. Last program, we had holiday sweets, the sweets of philanthropy. We had chocolate candy, we had chocolate cake, we had chocolate this. So we must be into the sweets and desserts with a piece of the philanthropic pie. Notice the money coming out of the pie here. Why produce a crazy program, boring program, the Philanthropic Planner? Well, we've been doing this for a number of years. And the idea is to have meaningful dialogue, to promote a forum, to have meaningful dialogue about ways of gifting, the importance of philanthropy to our community, to our state, region, country, and internationally. But to share with you what other people are doing in philanthropy. Forget about the mega, I used to say millions, now we say billions. Forget about that. I don't have to be a multimillionaire to be a philanthropist. So we talk about the many ways of giving. We talk about philanthropy, which is a major contributor to nonprofits, okay? We talk about different vehicles, strategies, and so on. We have a number of people that say, Bob, I would like to do more if I could. I would like to do more if I knew how. If I could simply means, do I have the capacity? I'm afraid of either the market, I'm afraid that I'll need this money in the future for long-term care or nursing. I'm afraid that I'll jeopardize legacy to my family, my children. All of these things that, human nature that we are faced with, okay? I would like to do more if I knew how is really a part of this program. What is my neighbor doing? You know, there's a book out there, I forget how old it is now, but The Millionaire Next Door. Well, here's a millionaire next door that you really don't think is very wealthy, but you would never know it. Non-pretentious, doesn't drive a big luxury car, doesn't have the accoutrements of wealth. But in philanthropy, we talk about the same thing. We talk about natural giving because they have either educated themselves or they have advisors that help them know where to gift, how to gift, and so on. We have some people that are afraid to gift, even though they have the capacity, and they know the different tools and structures and so on. But in a lot of cases, some nonprofits get a bad name, and that just spreads over by guilt by association to other nonprofits on if I give $100, how much of that $100 goes to cause. And that's a meaningful concern. And we look at nonprofits, we do some research for clients, digging into 990s and what the charity actually does and do they really perform. And we talk about impact philanthropy, where we want to monitor and quantify. We want to judge what they're doing. We want to look at their performance and say, are you doing what you say you're doing? When we look at how much of the dollars goes to the cause, if it's administrative fundraising and so on, if it's like 10%, that's good. If it's 30, 40, 80%, that's obviously not so good. So why produce this type of program? Philanthropy, gifting. So what we wanted to do, and we've had a good response. I was kind of surprised. I mentioned in the last program or the program before, someone asked me, well, Bob, who do you give to, and how do you give, and that kind of thing. So I shared in the program 3 or 4 or 5 charities that my wife and I give to annually. And I had a response on that and said, wow, that was kind of surprising. I was interested in not that you gave to this particular nonprofit, but the why did you give? And I think that's important as far as identifying with the charity's mission and their vision. And like I said before, are they actually performing and so on? Well, in addition to that, personally, I asked if you're interested, share with us so that we can share with you what people are doing, what organizations are they giving to, and why. So we thought each of these programs, we'd take 2 or 3 minutes and say, here is Joe and Mary, and what are they gifting and why? So this program, we just wanted to take a minute and say, Doctors Without Borders. We had a client that had an interesting experience there, and I'll come back to that in a second because it's a letter that was sent to us. Another one is St. Jude in Memphis, Tennessee, I recall, and St. Jude Children Research Hospital, and some of the things that they're doing. We are seeing some of these hospitals and research and centers and so on doing phenomenal work. Well, St. Jude is not only growing, but the impact that they're having on things like acute cancer for children, leukemia, and some of the advances that St. Jude is having in acute leukemia is amazing. I mean, the survival rate, the rate of success has grown substantially in the last few years. Let me, one more thing. Locally, if we have 2 or 3 charities, universities, or churches or synagogues or what have you, I wanted to include local charities. I think the last program we talked about the success that Healing Meals has had in a brief period of time, 2 or 3 years. But locally, this time I'd like to talk about Beans. That's Bean with a big Z. And this is a new coffee shop, if I can refer to it that way, by New England Pasta and Kim Morrison, I believe. And I wanted to share with you that locally, what some firms can do in the philanthropic vein. Well, Beans and Company is in Avon on Route 44. And Kim Morrison, I was right there, and Noel Alex, but dedicated to the mission of employing people with intellectual and physical disabilities. Well, because a couple of people asked me to look at that situation and that they were interested in gifting, and was that entity actually a 501c3, and is it a charity, and do you get a deduction, okay. Well, as an aside, I'm not concerned about new tax law. I'm not concerned about the limitations of SALT in affecting my deductions. Philanthropy and charity is not primarily a tax deduction savings. And we find out that people that really are philanthropic, yes, they may get a deduction, but that's not the primary motive. Philanthropic intent has to be there to be a meaningful donation. But anyway, looking into that, Be Thoughtful organization, that the Beans is a part of this Be Thoughtful movement. And it's one of, like I say, they are interested in employing and helping intellectual and physical disability. So they have members of their staff that would fall into that category. I'd like to share with you real quickly a couple of communications that we received, and I find out that, I get a letter or an email or something like that. We have a viewer. But I'd like to share with you, and it has to do with Doctors Without Borders. Now, for years, I've heard about Doctors Without Borders and that kind of thing, and I had a conversation with someone at a local meeting, and a third party or fourth party, as we're in a circle socializing, said something about the Philanthropic Planner program. And this lady was nice enough to follow up a day or two later and send a note, and I'd like to quickly refer to that note. Bob, you recently asked your viewers to share what charities they support and why they support them. This past summer, our daughter interned in New York City, or in New York office of Doctors Without Borders. Needless to say, a very rewarding experience. Jennifer cannot stop talking about her intern experience. At college, she returned to college, and she and her friends, college friends, are now trying to start a student chapter at their university about Doctors Without Borders. And over the holidays, Jen and her friends visited chapters at BC and URI, and they intend this spring to visit an existing chapter of Doctors Without Borders at Cornell. P.S. My husband and I made a donation to MSF, and that's Mercedes Sans Territories, Doctors Without Borders, and wanted to share our story. Thanks, Bob. Looking forward to your future programs. Thought you'd want to know about our experience and why. I found that interesting for a couple of reasons. One, getting youth involved in philanthropy is important, and that comes from our neighbors, our friends, our associate colleagues at work. We're finding, and this is a misconception, that millennials are not going to be good philanthropists. That is positively wrong. We're finding out that millennials as a group are outdoing the Xers, that they are interested in impact philanthropy, whether it's from environmental or to health, to a cause or what have you. And they're becoming more involved. So I wanted to share that with you also. This is actually an email. It starts off, I didn't know if this was spam or trash or whatever. The heading was, "How did I do?" Regarding QCDs, that's qualified charity distributions as it affects an RMD, a required minimum distribution. And I kind of thought this was interesting. This year, I've arranged 4 $100 gifts directly from my IRA. Well, 2 or 3 programs ago, I talked about the QCDs. And for review, if you're over 70 and a half, you're required to take, according to the IRS formula, a certain amount out of your qualified IRA monies. And this changes year to year depending on what the end of the year balance of your IRA qualified monies is and your age, you're a year older, and the different formula number, the divisor that we use. Well, there's a law, a bill that says that I can have, rather than being taxed on this requirement of taking my money out of my IRA, immediately taxed, I would like to gift some of that to my charity, but I don't want to be taxed as far as income is concerned. Now, a QCD, a qualified charitable distribution, I'm not going to get a tax deduction for gifting to the charity, but when we do the math, it's an efficient way of gifting to charity because I'm not taxed at my bracket for the income, even though I'm not getting a deduction, but the qualified charitable distribution has to go direct to the charity. It's not going to come to me, through me, writing a check to the charity. So how'd I do? This year, I've arranged 4 $100 gifts directly from my IRA. Now, the $100 is interesting. I mentioned in a program that most trustees of qualified monies, just efficiency, would recommend a minimum of $100. There are others that will have a qualified charitable distribution of $50 or what have you. We recommend $100. So this gentleman said, I've arranged 4 $100 gifts directly from my IRA for cash gifts. We set up 2 automatic monthly gifting programs. Again, this gentleman referred to one of our programs, one for $8.50 each month automatically out of our checking account, the other for $10 a month automatically out of our checking account. That's a total, a little more than $600 charitable donations for 2019. How'd I do? Stanley, you done good. You done good. One more here. This was an interesting note from Al's wife, she says. Mr. Thompson, discovered your program and was interested in some of your ideas and gifting insights. I lost my husband several years ago. Just a brief note for you. For a number of years, we gave to Al's older sister some periodic financial assistance, which she needed, but she never asked for. Al set aside a sizable amount in the bank, approximately $100,000, from which we used to take money out and to give to his sister, Al's sis. Since Al's passing, our children suggested my looking into possible reviewing and updating some of my legal documents, will, and so on, which I did. In addition to legacy and protecting the children, Al and I always had a provision for charitable bequests in our wills. I was intrigued with your charitable gift annuity approach of combining gifting during life, increasing retirement income, and benefiting charity. I contacted 2 of our favorite charities about these gift annuities. Since then, I've set up a gift annuity for Al's older sister, giving her lifetime income with the ultimate gift at sister's passing to our 2 favorite charities. Rosemary, Al's older sister, is in her mid-80s, and she's receiving almost $700 a month, every month for the rest of her life, with Al's little kitty ultimately going to charity. In addition, I understand I will get a deduction for setting up this wonderful annuity for Rosemary. Sorry this is so long, but thank you for helping me with my struggle to somehow help Al's Rosemary, Sister Rosemary, and she signs it, Al would be pleased. So when we talk about different ways of gifting and tools, and in this case, Al's wife contacted the charities and found out that she could set up a charitable gift annuity for someone else. And in this case, it was Al's older sister. I found that to be a very, very interesting story, and that you could just read between the lines that she was happy, Al's wife, was happy with what she did. Al would be happy. She signed at the end. And this money was going to go to charity anyway after Al's wife passing. And in the will, her revised will, she had a charitable bequest. And this was satisfaction, a great deal of satisfaction during Al's wife's life. St. Jude, I mentioned St. Jude a number of years ago. We set up quite a few charitable remainder unit trusts. Over a couple years, we had 62, 63 CRUTs, we call them, charitable remainder unit trusts. And a couple of those, the remainder interest, after the grantors, the creators of the trust passed, they had lifetime income from the charitable trust, but at their passing, you had charities in what we call remainder interest. And a couple of them had St. Jude, and it's interesting that I continue to get Promise magazine from St. Jude, and I'm updated on the wonderful things that they do, and that's where I came into that success on the acute leukemia for juveniles. When we get to talking about methods and tools, we don't have enough time in today's program, but in the past, we've talked about donor advised funds. Now, the meaningful part of, if you view this months later, it loses its significance, but we're filming this at the end of January, the beginning of the year. So learning about techniques and strategies, how to tactfully use the qualified charitable distribution out of my required minimum distribution out of my IRA, different tools. But another tool that's used at the end of the year, and in many cases we've recommended that if you are gifting based on your 2017, 2018 tax returns or whatever, if you have a pattern of gifting a certain amount, that if we break that, rather than looking at it at the end of the year and being subject to the emotional draw of receiving mail after mail after mail, soliciting donations in November and December, if we set up a program for on a monthly basis, and let's just say I put $200 or $300 a month into my donor advised fund, knowing that at the end of the year, let's say my charitable contributions are $4,000 or $5,000. And as I go on, I can draw out monies from my donor advised fund and direct it to my favorite charity. We have a number of people that on a quarterly basis are, an example of $250 a quarter going to a church building fund or something like that. It doesn't have to be monthly, but by my having the vehicle of a donor advised fund, I have the ability of drawing that money out. Now, at the end of the year, I may not have drawn everything out of that donor advised fund, and I may put more than that 4,000, maybe I'll put another 1,000 in. If I have the capacity, I would like to do more if I could, the capacity. So at the end of the year, stock market's good, my dividends and interest is good, things look very good. I have the capacity, the realization is I would like to contribute to a charity's mission
and their vision, and I want to monitor and see if they are delivering what they say they do. So donor advised funds are good vehicles. At the same time, we have some bills that are being proposed in Congress as it relates to whether we need to limit or control and regulate donor advised funds. So this is a very topical discussion point in Congress and by all of our nonprofits. There are over 340,000 donor advised funds. And not this last year, but the year before, those donor advised funds represented over $100 billion in donated monies. Now, some of that money may stay in there after a year. So the average has been that 28% of the donor advised fund may spill over into a future year. Well, if I had a private foundation, I have requirements on how much out of my private foundation I have to distribute and pay out. That came after some problem cases that we had in the past. So regulators, Congress is looking at this and saying maybe we should regulate donor advised funds the way we do private foundations. There's even excise tax, and when we talk about government getting involved, there's always this revenue potential. And if we some way tax a donor advised fund on the assets that are in there, similar to the private foundation, 1 or 2% excise tax, maybe that's some regulators' motivation. I just share that with you because we're going to hear more about donor advised funds. Donor advised funds are being used more. The growth of donor advised funds in the last few years is 4 times what our regular giving is. So we've got to recognize the potential there. At the office, I say minimize that screen. I'm only allowed that 3 times. But let me minimize that screen for 1 quick second. When we talk about donor advised funds, we talk about monies that are being put away. We can't forget the fact that the control of those monies is now the donor advised fund. They have the money, they're the ownership, and they will, in most cases, follow the advice of the donor and say, send $400 to my favorite charity. So we haven't heard the end of donor advised funds. We'll talk about it a little bit, not devote a whole program to donor advised fund, but we want to share with you the prudent use of a vehicle like the donor advised fund and these charitable gift annuities. And we find out that even pooled incomes are getting more attention today. So thanks for tuning in. Good philanthropy on your part, and let us know who you're gifting to and why. Thanks.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.